It was the sixth day of freshman orientation week when Miriam handed a bottle of water to that guy she calls her best friend. This time, I did not bother asking any more questions. I simply told her in the calmest voice I could muster that we were officially over. All this over a single bottle of water? Miriam scoffed with a condescending smirk. Fine by me. Try to stay mad for more than a few days this time because I could really use the peace and quiet. Her friends joined in, teasing her by saying she should be careful or some upperclassman might steal such a good-looking guy away. Miriam let out a cold snort and said he was just being petty and making a big deal out of nothing again. She reminded them that his family had already planned for him to study abroad, but he had refused. He even went as far as switching his major to something completely obscure just so he could attend the same university as her. 3 days of the silent treatment is usually his limit, she added with total confidence. I remained silent as I thought about how I had been in love with her for 7 years, following her every step of the way just to get into this school. In my mind, Miriam was my first love, the kind of person I honestly believed I would spend the rest of my life with. What she did not realize, however, is that you can let go of the wrong person just as easily as you can start over at a different school. I had already begun the paperwork to withdraw from the university weeks ago. I already applied to a prestigious college in London and was just waiting for my visa to be approved before leaving for good. Miriam, I'm truly finished with chasing you, I whispered to myself. After I initiated the breakup, she actually blocked me first to spite me. Her frenemy, Joey Dawson, tried to FaceTime me while I was in the middle of deleting our old photos, and my finger slipped, accidentally accepting the call. The screen showed a crowded booth at a restaurant where a group of people was eating and laughing loudly. I heard Joey asking her in a mocking tone if she was sure I would come crawling back and beg her to unblock me. He asked if she was at all worried that this time I might actually mean it and never look back. Miriam just laughed and took a slow sip of her juice after hearing her friend's question. You guys don't get it. Edward literally cannot function without me in his life, she said. She explained that I had always been the golden boy and that my parents had mapped out my entire future for me since I was a kid. He was supposed to go abroad for research, but he threw all of that away for me. He even signed up for a major nobody wants just to be at the same university, she said with absolute certainty. She insisted that 3 days of silence was my absolute limit. She was convinced that if she waited just a little longer, I would be the one coming back to beg for her forgiveness. Joey Dawson was sitting right next to her in his black leather biker jacket, and he slid his arm around her shoulders while teasing her. Wow, Miriam, you really know how to keep your man on a short leash, he joked. All the girls sitting around the table started laughing at his comment. I should warn you, though, a guy that hot might get snatched up by some senior girl, especially during the first week of school, one of them added. Miriam just smirked, looking completely unbothered. Let them have him for a bit. I could use the break. Once he realizes nobody else even compares to me, he will probably start behaving himself again. Another girl chimed in to tease her, saying that Miriam was playing a dangerous game. She said that if she had a boyfriend who was that wealthy and good-looking, she would have to pinch herself to make sure she wasn't dreaming instead of blocking him. Miriam's expression shifted slightly at that comment, and she let out a long sigh. I'm honestly just exhausted, Miriam complained. It has only been 6 days of orientation, and we have already had 4 massive arguments. Every single fight is about Joey. The poor guy was dying of thirst after drills, so I just handed him a bottle of water, but Edward refused to listen to reason. He insisted on a full explanation, and I just don't understand how someone can be that insecure, she continued. Joey Dawson just shrugged his shoulders with a look of feigned indifference on his face. Look, if he hates me that much, I will just keep my distance. I just want you two to stop fighting, so don't worry, I won't be a burden to you. The other girls immediately started defending Joey, saying that I was the one with the real personality problems. They argued that it was more than just typical jealousy and that I was being toxic. They pointed out that while Joey might not have my family's money, he was handsome and had a great personality. One of them even said that wealth does not matter when compared to having an interesting soul. Before Joey could say anything else, Miriam frowned and told him not to talk like that. She reminded them that I was still her boyfriend and Joey was her best friend, and that both of us were important to her. She admitted that she didn't actually want to end things with me. She just wanted me to fix my attitude. His constant suspicion is enough to drive anyone insane, she concluded. I could not stand to hear another word, so I quietly disconnected the call. My heart sank to the pit of my stomach just as the food I had ordered was delivered to my door. I sat there eating in silence, my face completely expressionless. However, the hand holding my fork was shaking uncontrollably, and I could not taste a single thing I was chewing. Miriam Sterling and I had grown up together, the quintessential childhood sweethearts. We went from being innocent playmates to lovers, having known each other for over a decade. Taking care of her had become an automatic habit for me. But this time, I was truly finished with the relationship. Things were not at all how she described them, and I had no intention of ever going back to her. A little while later, my mother called me. "Edward, are you absolutely sure about withdrawing from school and moving abroad?" she asked. I told her that I was completely serious. She then asked about Miriam, reminding me that the only reason I had chosen that specific college was to be with her. A long-distance relationship across an entire ocean is no small thing, and you really need to think this through, she warned. Her words only made the knot in my chest tighten, and my heart sank even deeper. I struggled to find the words to explain to her that Miriam and I were officially done. "I'm sorry, Mom," I finally said. "I realize now that I cannot keep forcing myself to stay at a school I hate, studying a major I have zero interest in, just for the sake of a girl. I want to live my own life instead of constantly revolving around someone else," I added. After I finished speaking, my mother was silent for a few seconds. When she finally spoke, her voice sounded surprisingly light. "You have finally grown up, son," she said gently. "I only ever wanted you to be happy. But I can see now that Miriam really is not the right person for you," she continued. She told me that the term in London didn't start until next month and that my spot was still waiting for me. She assured me there was plenty of time and that she would help me get the visa paperwork sorted out immediately. I managed a weak smile and thanked her. Once I had finally stabilized my emotions, I began gathering all the little gifts and souvenirs Miriam had given me over the years. I packed them away, one by one, into a large cardboard box. I carried the box downstairs, intending to throw it all in the trash. Just as I stepped out of the dormitory, I saw Joey Dawson escorting Miriam back. She was practically hanging off of him as they laughed and playfully shoved each other. "That case of beer was nothing. I could go 10 more rounds with you, Miriam. Are you ready to admit defeat yet?" Joey shouted. Miriam was doubled over laughing until she looked up and saw me standing there. She froze instantly. She quietly created some distance between herself and Joey, likely expecting me to get jealous and cause a scene like I used to. She probably thought I would rush over and demand to know what they were doing. Instead, I just gripped my box and walked right past them without saying a word. I did not even spare them a glance. Miriam looked at the box in my arms and reached out to stop me. "Wait a second, you can toss whatever else you want, but you have to keep that jar of paper stars. It took me an entire month to fold those, and I'm not doing it again," she demanded. "You have it backwards," I replied coldly. "I have no interest in keeping or returning anything related to an ex-girlfriend." Miriam looked me up and down before turning her head away with an arrogant huff. She told me to just make sure I didn't come crawling back to beg her for them later. As I turned to walk away, Joey Dawson reached out to block my path. "Edward, don't get the wrong idea. Miriam just had a little too much to drink today, and I was worried about her getting home safely. She really just sees me as one of the guys. Nothing more," he claimed. "Can't you just look at me like one of her girlfriends?" he asked with a smirk. "One of her girlfriends?" I let out a sharp, bitter laugh. I asked him if her other girlfriends played romantic couples with her in video games, or if they constantly had their hand around her waist, or if they took her out for late-night rides while she was wearing a miniskirt. "You are seriously delusional, and if you have a problem, you should check yourself into a clinic," I snapped. I told him to keep his disgusting excuses away from me, or I would seriously lose my cool and level him. Joey was visibly stunned by my outburst and let out an awkward laugh while his face turned beet red. "I honestly didn't think you would blow up over such a tiny thing. Fine, I will apologize if it makes you feel better. I'm done," Joey said, raising his hands in mock surrender. Miriam bit her lip and suddenly yanked him behind her. She glared at him and told him he better not dare apologize to me. "We're in college now, so stop acting like you were some big shot," she snapped at me. She told me to grow up and said that I could throw the stuff away for all she cared because she was definitely never folding another star for me. I did not even waste my breath replying to her as I walked over to the nearest trash can. I let go of the box and it landed in the bin with a heavy thud. When I got back to my dorm room, I collapsed onto my bed and drifted into a restless sleep. I was both physically exhausted and mentally drained, and my sleep was plagued by a series of chaotic dreams. I dreamt of Miriam when she was only 5 years old and the adults were teasing her for being a chubby little girl. Miriam had always been vain about her looks, and she started sobbing hysterically on the spot. In the dream, I jumped off my little stool and ran over to give her a big hug. "Don't cry. You are the cutest girl ever, and you are my favorite person," I told her in the dream. I gave her a loud kiss on the cheek, which made all the adults burst out laughing. She looked up at me, and her tears finally stopped falling. We just stared at each other in that way only children can, marking the start of a bond that went from childhood innocence to my first real love. Miriam and I have been inseparable for over a decade. She used to tell me all the time that no one else in the world would ever treat her as well as I did. I had always believed with all my heart that she would be the only one for me. That all changed during our junior year of high school when Joey Dawson showed up. He was the complete opposite of me, the typical loud and flashy bad boy who somehow became the school heartthrob. He had a buzz cut and was always chewing gum, claiming it helped him quit smoking. I lost track of how many times Miriam broke her own rules for him. I vividly remember her telling me that despite his wild behavior in public, he was actually quite sensitive and quiet when they were alone. His home life is a mess and his dad is abusive, she once explained. I just feel like we're similar because we are both desperate to escape our families. They seemed to have an instant connection from the moment they met, acting as if they had been close for years. They would go riding motorcycles and skateboarding, trying every extreme sport you could think of together. Whenever I sat down to tutor Miriam, she would insist on bringing Joey along. As a result, I ended up helping him with his grades as well. It got to the point where every time Miriam and I were on a date, Joey would find some excuse to call her away. I finally reached my breaking point and snapped at her. I asked her if she could please stop hanging out with him because I flat out hated the guy. Miriam looked at me like I was the crazy one and told me it wasn't her fault I didn't want to join in on their activities. She claimed she only left me out because she didn't want me to get hurt. "Why are you screaming at me? You total jerk," she yelled back. After that, she would lose her patience whenever I even mentioned Joey's name. She started going out to party with him first, and only after she had her fun would she return to me. She would look at me with a satisfied grin and ask if I was finally finished throwing my little tantrum. Nobody actually knows the real reason why I broke up with Miriam Sterling. It was about so much more than just a bottle of water. On the second day of freshman orientation, while everyone else was exhausted and sleeping, Miriam snuck out in the middle of the night to go street racing with Joey. She didn't return to her dorm the entire night. We had just had a fight that morning, and I spent the whole night calling her over and over, but she refused to pick up. While scrolling through TikTok, I saw a local news alert about a major motorcycle accident on the highway. I panicked and drove to the scene like a madman in the middle of the night. My mind was a complete blank, and I was so frantic that I jumped out of my car before it had even come to a full stop. I tumbled across the asphalt, scraping the skin off my arms and legs while my shoulder was torn open and covered in blood. When I finally looked up, I saw Joey Dawson in the distance, holding a terrified Miriam tightly in his arms and whispering comforting words in her ear. In that exact moment, something inside me finally snapped for good. I didn't say a word out loud. I just told myself that I had finally had enough and that we were over. I had to admit to myself that nothing truly lasts forever. 2 weeks later, while I was eating lunch in the dining hall, a notification popped up on my phone saying my visa had been approved. My mother sent me a follow-up message letting me know that my passport was already in the mail. If everything went according to plan, I would be leaving the country in just 3 days. Naturally, that was the moment Miriam and Joey walked into the cafeteria and sat down at a table right near mine. Joey was acting like he was her boyfriend, making a big show of dumping all the food he didn't like on her plate. Miriam gave him a playful swat and laughed, but I could see her eyes constantly drifting in my direction. She looked like she was waiting for me to be the one to break the ice. For the past 2 weeks, I hadn't reached out to her once, and I ignored her completely whenever we crossed paths. This time was no different as I picked up my tray and walked away without a second glance. That night, someone posted a photo of me eating in the dining hall on the campus confession page. When someone in the comments asked if I was single, I simply replied that I didn't have a girlfriend. It wasn't long before Miriam replied to my comment with a question mark. "You've got some nerve, Edward, claiming you don't have a girlfriend," she wrote. I rarely check Instagram these days, and I had completely forgotten that we were still following each other. Miriam followed up with a direct message, asking if I was really still holding a grudge over a bottle of water after 2 weeks. She told me my ego was getting out of hand and asked if I was ready to admit that I missed her. She threatened to block me again if I didn't have something nice to say. "Go ahead then, block me," Miriam wrote back with a winking emoji, her tone light and playful. She clearly thought I was just playing hard to get as an excuse to make up with her. She then suggested we grab dinner the next day, promising that she wouldn't bring Joey along. "Fall break is only a few days away, and we have to head home together anyway, so you can't really hide from me," she continued. She told me the date was set and ended the message with a kiss. Even now, Miriam still believed I was just having one of my usual moods, only this one was lasting a bit longer than the others. In the past, all she had to do was act a little cute and my heart would melt, leading me to forgive her for everything. I used to have an endless amount of patience, but that was only because I hadn't wanted to lose her back then. This time, I didn't say a word and proceeded to block and delete her from every single platform. The following day, Miriam cornered me in the cafeteria and remarked that I seemed to have finally grown a spine. She told me that she had unblocked me a long time ago and was annoyed that I hadn't even noticed. She accused me of intentionally avoiding her just to get a reaction. She looked at me with that familiar air of superiority and reached out to grab my phone, telling me to add my girlfriend back immediately. I pulled my phone away and raised my voice so she could hear me clearly. I asked her if anyone had ever taught her the basic courtesy of not bothering an ex-boyfriend. Actually, no, Miriam replied, tilting her chin up defiantly. She told me that in her experience, giving a guy a little bit of space only made him realize how much he couldn't live without her. I was stuck between being furious and finding the whole thing pathetic, so I stood up to leave. Miriam grabbed my arm and yanked me back down into the chair, saying she had finally gotten the message about my bad attitude. She told me she had gone all the way across town just to get me a sandwich from my favorite deli. She insisted that the least I could do was eat it before I stormed off. I saw you eating all by yourself yesterday, and you looked so pathetic without me, like you didn't have a single soul to talk to in this entire school, she said. She then casually shifted the conversation and asked if I had already booked my flight home for the upcoming fall break. I have already booked my flight, but I am not going home, I told her firmly. Miriam didn't miss a beat and told me to send her the flight number later. She said she would just buy the seat right next to mine so we could travel together. Before I could even respond, Joey's irritated voice cut through the air, asking Miriam if she didn't have something more important to be doing. Sometimes I honestly wondered if Miriam had installed a GPS tracker on his phone, because he always seemed to show up at the most awkward times. I couldn't understand how Joey Dawson always managed to perfectly time his interruptions whenever we were having a private conversation. Miriam glared at him and gave his arm a playful punch, asking why he was using that tone with her. She asked him if he didn't think reconciling with her boyfriend was a top priority. This time, however, Joey didn't seem interested in playing along with her games. "Do you have any idea how long I've been waiting for you to text me back while I was trying to give you space?" he snapped. Miriam was momentarily stunned into silence by his sudden outburst. Joey just stared at her and let out a cold, disappointed laugh. "Right, I should have known that making up with your boyfriend would be way more important than me," he said bitterly. He added that even if that was the case, they could have at least grabbed lunch together. "I could have even helped you talk to him. So why did you feel the need to hide this from me?" Joey continued. He told her that if she was tired of hanging out with him, she should just say so, because he wasn't the type to cling to someone who didn't want him around. After saying that, Joey slammed his tray onto the table with a loud bang and stormed out. Looking at the way he was acting, a stranger would have easily mistaken him for Miriam's actual boyfriend, while I was just some third wheel. I was so beyond frustrated that I had to restrain myself from flipping my own tray over. "Just go after him," I said flatly. I told her that I was perfectly capable of eating by myself and that she shouldn't let a good meal go to waste. I mentioned that I wouldn't be able to get food like this once I moved to London anyway. Miriam, true to form, just assumed I was being jealous again and gave me a condescending, indulgent smile. "Are you really going to just let me walk away like that?" she asked, leaning in closer to study my expression with a playful look. I responded with a look of pure, unadulterated annoyance. "Go wherever you want, Miriam. It really has nothing to do with me anymore," I said. When she didn't get the reaction she was looking for, Miriam sighed and told me I always made it seem like she didn't have her priorities straight. She claimed that she only stayed friends with Joey because she felt sorry for him. She argued that nobody actually chooses to be a bad boy from the start and that his life had been hard. "You have always had everything you ever wanted and never lacked love, so you could never understand what he's been through," she said. She then tried to reassure me by saying that she still loved me despite everything. I chose to ignore her completely and focused entirely on finishing my sandwich. Once she saw that I was actually eating, Miriam seemed to relax, clearly thinking that her sweet words had worked their magic on me again. She pulled out her phone and snapped a photo of me while I was eating. She immediately posted it to Facebook with a caption about successfully taming her jealous monster for the 100th time. Early the next morning, I went to the registrar's office to pick up my officially stamped withdrawal papers. Once I had the formal notice in hand, I had a long list of errands to run before my departure. My phone didn't stop vibrating the entire time as Miriam started sending me messages through small bank transfers. She sent a series of $1 transfers, each with a different note attached to it. One asked if I was awake yet, while another complained about still being blocked on iMessage. A third one asked if I had forgotten something, and the last one claimed she hadn't slept at all the night before and was completely exhausted. Looking at the long list of transfer notifications, I briefly considered finally just telling her everything. I thought that over a decade of knowing each other at least deserved a proper, civil ending. However, I very quickly talked myself out of that idea. Joey Dawson had just posted a new update on Facebook. He wrote about how he had gone a little too hard the night before and ended up in the hospital. He added that his best friend was so worried about him that she was skipping her fall break to stay at school and take care of him. He had attached 3 photos to the post to prove his point. point. The first was a picture of the deli sandwich Miriam had bought for me yesterday, now sitting on his hospital bedside table. The second photo was taken from above, showing Miriam kneeling on the floor to tie Joey's shoelaces for him. In the third photo, Miriam had fallen asleep while leaning against the foot of his hospital bed. Joey's leg, which was wrapped in bandages, was resting casually across her lap. The whole scene looked incredibly intimate and suggested they were much more than just friends. So the reason she hadn't slept all night was because of him, not me. I scrolled through the comments with a blank expression on my face, but I could feel that familiar, dull ache returning to the center of my chest. There is definitely something going on between these two. They don't look like just friends to me, one person commented. Another wrote that they totally shipped the couple and thought they were a perfect match. Someone else asked Joey if it was true that Miriam had only chosen to attend Northwood University because of him. Joey replied that it was absolutely true and that she could have gone to a much better school if she hadn't thought they were too far away. He claimed that she had dragged her boyfriend along to Northwood just to stay close to him. Man, you are a total legend. You need to start teaching a class on how to pull this off, another guy replied. An overwhelming sense of bitterness washed over me as I realized the real reason Miriam had chosen this university was Joey Dawson all along. I wondered what that made me in her eyes. It seemed I was nothing more than a convenient punchline to their joke. I turned off my phone and went back to packing my suitcases. My heart was aching, but I refused to let a single tear fall down my face. After all, as far as I was concerned, we had already been broken up for a while now. I promised myself that I would never allow her to make me lose control of my emotions ever again. Late that night, Miriam suddenly showed up at my dormitory door. She told me that I should cancel my flight home because it wasn't worth the long trip for just a few days of break. She suggested that we just stay on campus and hang out together instead. Miriam noticed the look on my face and hesitated for a moment before laughing it off. She asked which person had managed to upset the little prince this time. I looked her in the eyes and told her very seriously that we were broken up and she needed to stop coming by my room. I know. We are technically broken up, she said with a dismissive wave of her hand. She smiled as she pulled a brand new glass jar filled with paper stars out of her bag. She told me she had folded a whole new set for me and asked if I liked them. If you dare to throw this jar away too, I am seriously never making another one for you, she warned. She told me once more to cancel my flight because she was serious about us staying here. She also warned me not to call her parents to complain about why she wasn't coming home for the holidays. You have been acting so moody for the last 2 weeks that we barely spent any time together, she complained. She told me that if I left for another week, I would probably turn into a giant ball of resentment. She tried to shove the jar of stars into my hands, but I took a deliberate step backward. My expression was completely flat and bordering on cold. I told her again that we were broken up and that seeing her in a week or a year made absolutely no difference to me anymore. I looked her in the eyes and told her that I simply did not care about her at all. Miriam stared at me as the color slowly drained from her face. She asked if I was really still that angry and said she truly didn't understand what I was making such a big fuss about. She accused me of pretending to be over her when it was obvious I couldn't live without her. Maybe I just treated you too well in the past, and now you've become completely spoiled and arrogant, she spat. I replied coldly, asking her if not wanting to spend time with her was her definition of being arrogant. I asked her directly if she thought lying to me about staying for Joey Dawson was some kind of game. I don't care who you spend your time with anymore, but stop using these pathetic excuses to try and manipulate me, I said, adding that she was being disgusting. Miriam closed her eyes for a moment as if she had finally reached her breaking point. She suddenly smashed the glass jar of stars onto the floor with a loud crash. Fine, yes, part of the reason I am staying is because of Joey, she shouted. She told me to ask myself if I wouldn't do the same thing for a friend who was injured and had nobody else to look after them. She claimed that the only reason he went racing and got hurt was because she had been ignoring him to please me. She insisted that since his injury was technically her fault, she was morally obligated to stay and take care of him. This is not the time for you to be stubborn and prideful, Edward, because this is my responsibility now, she said. She begged me to just stop fighting with her about it because she was truly exhausted by the drama. I honestly didn't have the energy to argue with her anymore either. Fine, is there anything else you want to say? Because I'm going to bed, I said. Without waiting for an answer, I turned around and started walking back into my room. Miriam took a deep, shaky breath and screamed at my back back as I walked away. She told me that I was the one who had gone too far this time, and that she had said everything she needed to say. She said she didn't care if I canceled my flight or not, because she was definitely staying on campus for the break. You better think long and hard about this, because if you give me the silent treatment for another week and I get even closer to Joey, don't you dare come crying back to me, she threatened. Hearing her final warning made a fresh surge of anger boil up inside of me. I knew Miriam was only using Joey Dawson as a weapon because she was so sure I couldn't handle the thought of losing her. What she didn't realize was that I was already leaving the country. Whatever happened between the two of them after I was gone was absolutely none of my business. At exactly 7 o'clock the next morning, I wheeled my 2 suitcases out of the dorm and caught a cab to the airport. I used to be terrified of the idea of being alone and thought that life without Miriam would be unbearable. Now, I was slowly beginning to realize that I could not only survive without her, but I would probably thrive. About 20 minutes before my flight was set to board, I received a call from an unknown number. It turned out to be Miriam calling from one of her friend's phones. "Edward, you total jerk, get down here and take me to breakfast right now," she demanded. She complained that the cafeteria was closed for the break and asked if I was trying to let my girlfriend starve to death. I replied in a very flat voice that I was no longer in my dormitory. "Then where are you?" she asked. "I'm at the airport," I replied. There was a long silence on the other end of the line before she finally spoke again. "Edward, did you not listen to a single word I told you last night?" she asked, her voice trembling with anger. "I heard you perfectly fine. You said you were going to get closer to Joey Dawson, so I just wanted to wish you both a happy life together," I said. Miriam let out a disbelieving laugh, and I could practically hear her gritting her teeth. "Fine, that is just great. I swear to God, Edward, if I am ever the one to reach out to you again, I'm a complete idiot," she screamed. I didn't even bother to respond to her outburst. In the background, I could hear her friend telling her that her boyfriend was completely useless and couldn't even be bothered to help her. She told Miriam to stop waiting around for me because Joey was still at the hospital and was waiting for her to bring him some food. Miriam immediately agreed to go and take care of Joey. Just as she was about to hang up the phone, I spoke up one last time. "Miriam, if you ever call me again, I'm going to change my phone number," I warned. She just let out a cold snort and told me she couldn't care less before hanging up. After a long 10-hour flight, I finally touched down in London. Being in a completely new country meant I had an endless list of things to do. I spent my first few days dealing with school paperwork, finding a place to live, and trying to adjust to my new surroundings. I was so busy that I barely had any time to think about my old life. It took several days before I finally felt somewhat settled. One night, I opened my social media apps and saw that my feed was completely covered in updates from Joey Dawson. He had posted an entire gallery of photos, and Miriam was in every single one of them. As the days went by, the poses and the photos they posted together became increasingly intimate. There was one specific close-up shot of Miriam's profile while she was fast asleep right next to Joey's hospital bed. Joey had captioned the photo by saying that when she was tired, she treated his hospital bed like it was her own. He joked about her forgetting that he was actually a guy. I stared at that photo for a long time, realizing that no matter how close they had been before, they had never been quite this physical. I suddenly remembered her warning about getting closer to Joey and how she told me not to come crying back to her. I realized that she must have known I hadn't deleted Joey from my contacts yet, and she was likely staging these photos just to get a reaction out of me. A mutual friend of ours commented on the post, asking if Miriam didn't still have a boyfriend and suggesting that they were crossing a line. Joey immediately fired back, telling them they had no idea what they were talking about because we had already broken up. He threatened to block anyone else who left sarcastic comments on his page. I just shook my head after reading the exchange and finally deleted Joey from my friend list. Over the next few weeks, I went ahead and changed my phone number and created entirely new social media accounts. I gradually started making a new circle of friends at my university in London. 2 weeks later, my mother called me again, and her voice sounded completely drained. "Edward, did you really not tell Miriam that you were moving out of the country?" she asked. She told me that the girl had been acting like she was losing her mind, trying to track me down. I was taken aback and asked her what exactly had happened. My mother explained that it took Miriam a full week after classes started to realize I wasn't actually on campus. When she couldn't reach me, she apparently panicked and thought something terrible had happened to me, so she went straight to the police. Once the school told her that you had officially withdrawn, she bought a plane ticket and flew home that same night, my mom said. She told me that Miriam had shown up at our front door, demanding to know if I was planning on taking a gap year. I told her straight out that you had moved to London for school, but she absolutely refused to believe me, she continued. Miriam kept insisting that there was no way I would ever leave the country without telling her first. My mother said she eventually got tired of the drama and sent her away. The problem is that now she is showing up at the house every single day, crying and begging for a way to talk to you. My mom sighed. She told me she was reaching her her breaking point and asked me to please just talk to Miriam one last time to clear things up. I decided to log back into my old messaging account just to get her to stop harassing my mother. As soon as I removed her number from my block list, an incoming FaceTime call from her flashed across my screen. I hadn't seen her in only a few weeks, but Miriam looked like a completely different person. Her eyes were red and swollen. Her face was deathly pale, and she looked absolutely exhausted. She had deep, dark circles under her eyes that made it obvious she hadn't slept in days. "You had better start explaining exactly what is going on right now," she demanded. It was only when she saw the bright morning sunlight streaming through the window behind me that she finally realized I was in a completely different time zone. "Edward, how could you just leave me like this? Where on earth are you?" she sobbed. I looked at her with a completely calm expression and reminded her that I had told her many times that we were over. I told her that I had absolutely no obligation to report my life plans to an ex-girlfriend. "And more importantly, you need to stop harassing my mother," I added. Miriam let out a bitter, hollow laugh, which quickly turned into a fresh stream of tears. "Are you really telling me that you've gone this far all because of a single bottle of water?" she asked hysterically. "What is it that you're even trying to say to me right now?" she cried out. She was laughing and crying at the same time, her behavior becoming increasingly hysterical. She kept saying that she couldn't understand how anyone could possibly act the way I was acting. "You were the one who insisted on following me to this school, even though it meant giving up your bright future," she screamed. "And now you're telling me that just because I handed a guy a drink, you decided to drop out and move across the world without saying a single word to me? Who does something like that, Edward? I don't accept this. I refuse to accept any of it," she yelled. I simply looked at her and reminded her that she was the one who had agreed to the breakup in the first place. "That doesn't even count. I only said yes because I thought you were just having another one of your jealous, irrational outbursts," she countered. I told her that whatever she chose to believe was none of my concern anymore. I wasn't going to let her manipulate me with her excuses this time. "Miriam, just as you claim to be sick of my constant suspicion, I am completely exhausted from spending every waking moment worrying about you," I told her. I said that I simply didn't have the strength to keep the relationship going anymore. Miriam froze and asked me when she had ever said she was sick of me. I let out a cold laugh and asked if she had already forgotten her own words. I told her that when Joey had FaceTimed me, she hadn't mentioned me once. I said I was willing to believe that the call itself was an accident, but that I had heard every single word she said at that restaurant. "You said my suspicion was so bad that it would drive anyone insane," I reminded her. Miriam's face went completely white and she started to panic. She tried to claim she was only joking and asked why she would keep getting back together with me if she was actually tired of me. "I have always known that you are possessive and I have been doing my best to deal with it," she said. She told me she couldn't understand why I was suddenly taking everything so seriously this time. She kept repeating that she didn't understand what had changed. "I have been absolutely miserable with you ignoring me for the past 2 weeks," she cried. She told me she had been waiting every day for me to be the one to reach out to her like I always did. She asked how I could possibly think she was tired of me. "When I finally realized that you weren't coming back to school, I completely fell apart," she sobbed. She said she was terrified that I had been in a horrible accident and that she had spent days calling everyone we knew to try and find me. "I never in a million years imagined that you would just pack up and move to another country without a single moment of hesitation," she said. She looked at the screen and asked how I could possibly be so cruel to her. Miriam's eyes were bloodshot and tears were streaming down her face. I felt so much irritation that I couldn't even look at her anymore. "Are you finished yet?" I asked. I told her that if she didn't have anything else to say, she should probably go talk to her best friend while I went to get some breakfast. Miriam let out a cold, bitter laugh. "The fact that you're still so hung up on Joey Dawson just proves that you still have feelings for me, doesn't it?" she asked. I chose not to give her a response. "I'm warning you for the last time, don't you dare block me again," she screamed through her tears. She told me not to force her to buy a plane ticket and come drag me back herself. My head was throbbing as I hung up the call, feeling completely emotionally drained. Knowing her personality, there was a very real chance she would actually follow through on her threat to fly here. I decided to just keep her as a contact, but muted all her notifications, having already made up my mind never to respond to her again. Over the next 3 days, I went on a posting spree, sharing photos of all the delicious meals I was eating. My mother saw the posts and called to ask who was doing all the cooking. I told her it was my new roommate, who was also an international student. One night, I got a craving for some comfort food from back home and decided to try cooking it myself. My cooking skills were so bad that I ended up setting off the smoke alarm in the middle of the night. My roommate, Sierra Thompson, came out of her room looking like she was ready to kill me, her beautiful face scrunched up in annoyance. She eventually took pity on me and went into the kitchen to whip up a bowl of tomato and egg noodles. I ate every single bite and even finished the broth. From that night on, she started inviting me to join her whenever she was cooking. Her name was Sierra, and she had officially become my new dining companion. My mother gave a knowing laugh over the phone when I told her about Sierra. After my classes ended that day, I stopped by the grocery store to pick up some pork ribs, thinking I would ask my roommate if she wanted to try a new recipe with me. Just as I reached the entrance to my apartment building, I looked up and saw her standing there. Miriam Sterling was waiting right outside my building, holding a massive bouquet of flowers in her arms. It occurred to me that outside of my mother, absolutely no one knew my exact address in London. I realized she must have meticulously analyzed the backgrounds of my social media photos to track down where I was living. Miriam stared at me for a long time before telling me that I looked like I had lost weight. I almost choked on my own spit when she said that. I felt too awkward to tell her that I had actually gained a few pounds thanks to Sierra's amazing cooking. I know I'm the last person you want to see, but I just had to come here, she said softly. She pulled out her phone and showed me the screen, proving that she had completely deleted Joey Dawson from her life. She looked at me hopefully and asked if I could finally forgive her now. I only had one thing to say to her. We are finished, Miriam, so please just stop bothering me. She stood there frozen as her eyes immediately began to fill with tears. Edward, I'm begging you, please don't talk to me like I'm a stranger, she whispered. She grabbed my hand with a desperate grip, her eyes bloodshot and her voice cracking from emotion. She told me I could yell at her or do whatever I needed to do to get my anger out, as long as I didn't leave her. I was completely fed up with her drama and violently yanked my hand out of her grasp. I reached out and snatched the bouquet of flowers from her hands before throwing them directly into the middle of the street. What is even the point of you saying all of this now? I asked. I wanted to know where all of this passion and effort was back when we were actually together. You went around telling Joey Dawson that I was petty and that I wasn't man enough for you, I reminded her. I told her she knew perfectly well that very few people in this world would ever dare to disrespect me to my face. Yet for her sake, I had repeatedly swallowed my pride and let her walk all over me. In the end, I was always the one who came crawling back to apologize just because I couldn't bear the thought of being without you, I said. I reminded her that I had only chosen Northwood University because she said she didn't want us to be apart. I had willingly walked away from top-tier universities just to make sure we could be at the same school. Do you have any idea how much I was looking forward to our future together? I asked. My only goal was to be with her, but then I discovered the real reason she wanted to go to Northwood was because Joey was there. I told her that she had played us both for fools and had treated me like nothing more than a joke. Miriam's eyes widened and her mouth hung open, but she couldn't find the words to defend herself. I reminded her of our fight on the second day of orientation and how I had tried so hard to convince myself not to overreact. Even though she refused to see me or answer my calls, her roommate eventually told me she had snuck out to go racing with Joey Dawson. I was out of my mind with worry that night, and I was driving so fast to find you that I crashed my car and mangled my shoulder, I said. And while I was bleeding, you were busy crying in Joey's arms. Miriam began shaking her head violently as she finally broke down. She kept apologizing and sobbing that she didn't know I was there and that she had been terrified herself. She tried to step forward to hug me, but I had absolutely zero patience left for her and pushed her away. Miriam stood there in shock, tears continuing to stream down her face in silence. You claim you didn't know, but you were clearly enjoying every second of the attention, I countered. I told her that she used the best friend excuse as a shield so she could flirt with him as much as she wanted without ever having to take responsibility for it. Don't you dare try to tell me you had no idea what he was posting about us on social media, I added. I told her she was truly disgusting before turning to walk away, but Miriam grabbed my arm with all her strength and refused to let go. I swear on my life that I never had any romantic feelings for him, she cried. She claimed she only let him post those photos because she wanted to make me jealous and get my attention. She reminded me that we had been together for over a decade and said she couldn't just let that go. I promise I will never go out alone with another guy again, and I will never complain about you being possessive, she begged. She was sobbing so hard that she was almost unrecognizable, a far cry from the proud and composed girl she used to be. She kept a death grip on my arm and wouldn't let go, so I just lit a cigarette and let her hang there. We stayed like that for about 10 minutes until Sierra Thompson finally walked out of the building wearing an apron and looking extremely annoyed. Dinner is ready, and if you don't get upstairs right now, there won't be any left for you, Sierra announced. I told her I was busy and asked her to take the ribs up first. Sierra raised an eyebrow and asked if I was seriously going to skip the beef stew she had spent the entire afternoon making just for me. I thought about it for a second and realized it wasn't fair to Sierra to let her hard work go to waste, so I decided to go inside and eat. However, Miriam was still clinging to my arm and demanded to know who this girl was. Sierra walked over and physically nudged her aside to get to me, rolling her eyes in the process. She told Miriam to get a grip and stop acting like she was in some tragic movie. Miriam obviously had her own classes back home and couldn't stay in London forever. Despite that, she started flying in every single weekend just to see me, spending all her time waiting outside my building. Every time she saw me coming home with Sierra, she would give her a hateful look and mutter under her breath about how there were flies everywhere. Sierra, who was carrying a bag of groceries, nudged me with her elbow and joked that my ex-girlfriend seemed to have just called her trash. Because of the constant harassment from Miriam, I began to seriously look into moving to a new place. I had originally only rented an off-campus apartment because I missed the deadline for student housing. Since a spot had recently opened up in the dorms, I made plans to move back onto campus. While I told Sierra, she didn't say a word and just continued chopping vegetables with a very intense focus. The way she was slamming the knife down was actually a little intimidating. We barely spoke a word to each other for the rest of the day until that night, when she finally approached me with a stoic face and asked if I wanted some soup. I felt a bit awkward and told her I should probably pass because I wanted to eat something a bit lighter. Sierra thought about it for a moment and then offered to make me a healthier version of the dish. I hesitated for a second before sighing and agreeing to have some. While we were eating, Sierra slowly brought up the subject of my ex-girlfriend. She told me that if Miriam showed up again, she would be more than happy to handle the situation for me. She insisted that there was absolutely no reason for me to move out just because of her. I asked her how exactly she planned on handling it. Sierra just gave me a mysterious little smirk and didn't offer any details. I have no idea what she actually did, but Miriam didn't show her face for an entire month after that. The only thing I got from her was a constant stream of messages where she stubbornly shared every detail of her day, clearly trying to maintain some form of connection. After another month had passed, I finally blocked her number again because Sierra and I had officially started dating. The next time Miriam made an appearance, it was around 8 o'clock on a Saturday night. Sierra and I were out on the apartment balcony having a little barbecue. The mood was perfect as Sierra leaned in close and nervously asked if she could kiss me. Right at that moment, my phone vibrated with a text from an unknown number. The message simply said not to kiss her. The screen was filled with the same repetitive plea, begging me over and over again not to kiss her. I didn't even have to guess to know who it was from. I looked over the balcony railing at the street below. I realized in that moment that I was finally ready to say a final goodbye to my first love and fully embrace this new relationship. As Sierra closed her eyes, I leaned down and kissed her. I heard later that Miriam had stood out in the rain all through that night. By the time she flew back home, she had fallen seriously ill, and not long after that, she broke her leg in a bad fall. I never once reached out or went to visit her. When winter break rolled around, Sierra and I flew back home together, and I introduced her to my mother. My mom took one look at me and smiled, noting that a few months abroad had completely changed me. She told me I looked like I was finally glowing with happiness. Sierra stood next to me with a very proud grin on her face. During dinner, my mother casually mentioned that she had heard Miriam was planning on doing an exchange program in London the following year. She noted that the school Miriam would be attending wasn't actually that far from mine. I just shrugged my shoulders, feeling completely indifferent to the news. I told her that the most I would do for her is recommend a good local restaurant, but anything beyond that was strictly off the table. There is no point in constantly looking back at the past because it only serves to complicate the present. The only thing anyone can do is keep moving forward. What are you thinking about over there? Sierra asked me with a sugary sweet smile. She leaned in and whispered into my ear in a mock-threatening tone, promising that she would never let that girl get within a mile of me. I let out a sigh and told her she needed to relax a little bit. She just gave me a dismissive snort. I knew by the look in her eyes that she was already starting to plan something. I had to admit to myself that being in a healthy relationship like this was infinitely better than what I had before. Perhaps you, like the person in this story, have once altered your entire life path for someone else or tolerated the blurred boundaries of a so-called best friend just to keep the peace. Please remember that a healthy relationship should feel as natural and comforting as a warm bowl of soup on a cold night. It shouldn't be like a jar of broken glass stars that forces you to sacrifice your dignity just to pick up the pieces, only to end up getting hurt anyway. You should never be afraid to tear it all down and start over again. As the story shows, once you stop looking back, you will realize that the world is vast enough to hold all of your light. It is big enough for you to find someone who gives you total security without you ever needing to check up on them. I hope you find the inner strength to walk away whenever you need to. I hope you find a love that is honest and refreshing, one that doesn't require you to constantly prove your worth or exhaust yourself trying to please someone else.